There's a salsa club out in Juancito on the far east edge of Cali, where the floor doesn't really come alive until 1 in the morning. The first night a friend dragged me there, I stood against the wall for almost 2 hours holding a beer I didn't want, watching people move in a way I couldn't, feeling more like a tourist than I'd felt in years. And the thing is, I hadn't felt like a tourist in a long time. In Medellín, I'd gotten comfortable. Honestly, too comfortable. A foreign guy in Provenza can coast forever. The bars are packed with other foreigners, half the menus have English on them, and you can go a full week without saying a Spanish sentence harder than ordering eggs. In that club in Juancito, nobody was going to meet me halfway. Nobody cared where I was from. That was the entire point, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to understand why it mattered. I'm Luke. I've spent the last 7 years moving between cities in Latin America, and about 20 months of that has been in Colombia, most of it in Medellín, a much shorter stretch in Cali. People ask me to compare the two constantly, usually because they've heard things, usually because they're trying to decide where to point a one-way plane ticket. So this is that comparison, but it's not the one you think you clicked on. By the end of this, you're going to understand what actually differs about dating in these two cities as a foreigner, why the easier city is the trap and the harder one is the reward, and why the exact question most guys are asking when they line these two places up gets them the wrong answer every single time. If you're weighing something like this for yourself, or you just want to know what it's actually like on the ground instead of what a highlight reel tells you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Let me take you back to why I ended up in Cali in the first place. I want to be straight with you about the math before I say anything else, because it's the honest caveat this whole video sits on. I lived in Medellín for about 18 months, spread across a few stays. I was in Cali for roughly 6 weeks. 6 weeks against 18 months is not a fair fight, and I'm not going to pretend I know Cali the way I know Medellín, because I don't. But 6 weeks is long enough to see the shape of a place, and sometimes coming in fresh, without the comfort you've built up somewhere else, you see things clearer than the guy who's been marinating in one bubble for 2 years. So take what I say about Cali as a sharp first impression, not a doctorate, and take what I say about Medellín as somebody who stopped being a visitor there a long time ago. I went to Cali because Medellín had started to feel hollow. Not the city, the scene. Parque Lares, on a Friday, the same conversations with the same rotating cast of foreign men who'd all read the same 3 YouTube channels and thought they'd discovered something. I'd also just come out the far side of a relationship that cost me a lot of money and a chunk of my self-respect, which I'll get into later, and I wanted to be somewhere that the machine I'd gotten caught in didn't exist. Cali doesn't get the foreigner traffic Medellín does. That was most of the appeal. I booked a place in Granada, which is the upscale restaurant and nightlife pocket, figuring I'd land somewhere familiar feeling and figure it out from there. I paid about $600 for a month in a decent one-bedroom, which, after Medellín rents, felt like a gift. A comparable place in Provenza or Manila was running me $1,100 or $1,200 by then, sometimes more, because poblado prices have gone insane as the foreigners poured in. First impression of Cali, decoded into something you can actually use. It's hotter, it's flatter, it's less polished, and it is dramatically less set up for you. Medellín has spent a decade building infrastructure for foreign men. Cali has not. In Poblado, there's an entire ecosystem, the co-working spaces, the English-speaking dentists, the girls on the apps who list their height in feet because they know their audience. In Granada, I'd sit down at a bar, and I was often the only obvious foreigner in the room, and people looked at me not with hostility but with a kind of mild curiosity, like, what are you doing here specifically? In Medellín, you're wallpaper. In Cali, you're a small event, and I want you to sit with that difference, because almost everything that follows comes out of it. Being wallpaper is easy, and it is shallow. Being a small event is harder, and it opens doors that the wallpaper guy never even sees. The central tension of these two cities, for a foreigner, is this. Medellín is easy to arrive into and very hard to go deep in. Cali is hard to arrive into, and, if you actually do the work, much easier to go deep in. Most guys optimize for the arrival, and they pick the city that's easiest to land in and start dating in week 1, and they never understand why a year later they're lonely in a city full of people. I made a version of that mistake myself, and I'll own it. But let me show you the actual dynamic first, because you can't fix a problem you can't see. Here's the thing nobody tells you about Medellín. The foreigner flood changed the water for everybody, including the women who live there and have nothing to do with any of it. When tens of thousands of foreign men show up in one small handful of neighborhoods, some of them behaving badly, some of them treating the place like a theme park, an entire local response grows up around that. Part of that response is an economy, a real, structured economy of women and men whose relationship to foreign guys is fundamentally transactional, and who are very good at making it not look that way for exactly as long as they need to. And the other part of the response, the part almost nobody talks about, is that a lot of local women who are not part of any of that have become deeply cynical about foreign men because they've watched what the scene became, and they do not want to be mistaken for it. So you get this split. In Pobledo, you can find someone in 20 minutes on an app. What you cannot easily tell, in those first 20 minutes, is which side of that split you're standing on. Let me give you a specific one. Month 3 of one of my Medellín stays, I matched with a woman, we'll leave her name out, and everything about it was frictionless, in a way that in hindsight was the tell. She spoke great English. She suggested a restaurant, a specific one, an expensive one in Manila. She knew the cocktail menu cold. Halfway through dinner, there was a story about a sick relative and a pharmacy bill, delivered with real tears, and by dessert, there was a soft, almost apologetic ask. And look, maybe it was all true, I'll never know. But the whole thing ran on rails. It was a performance I've now seen enough times to recognize the choreography of, and the choreography exists because it works, because there's a steady supply of guys like me at that table who want the easy story badly enough to pay for it. That date is the compressed version of what Medellín's ease actually is. The ease is the product. The ease is what's being sold. Now Cali. That night in Juanchito, standing against the wall, I watched something I'd never really registered in Medellín. In Cali, the social world organizes itself around dance, the way Medellín's organizes around bottle service and apps. Salsa isn't a hobby there, it's the language. It's how people meet, how they signal who they are, how a group of friends spends a Tuesday. And here's what that does to a foreigner. It makes money almost irrelevant and skill everything. In Pobledo, I could buy my way into a decent night. In that club, my credit card was worthless, and my 2 functioning dance moves made me invisible. Women weren't rejecting me. It was worse than that. They weren't seeing me at all because I wasn't participating in the thing the room was actually about. I stood at the edge of the actual social life of the place with no way in, and no amount of being a novelty foreigner changed it. The night that flipped it for me came a couple weeks later. A guy from my building took me to a smaller spot near San Antonio, the old bohemian neighborhood up on the hill, and instead of trying to be impressive, I just told the truth. I can't dance, teach me. I'll embarrass myself, I don't care. And that honesty did something the foreigner novelty never could. His friends adopted me for the night. 2 of the women in the group spent an hour walking me through the basic step, laughing at me, not with me, and it was the most connected I'd felt with anyone in that city. Nothing romantic happened that night. But I got invited to the next thing, and the thing after that, and one of the women I met through that friend group I ended up seeing for the back half of my time there. Slower, realer, built on the fact that I'd shown up as a person willing to be bad at something in front of strangers, not as a wallet with a passport. That's the whole difference in one contrast. In Medellín, the door is wide open, and most of what's just inside it is shallow or working an angle. In Cali, the door is heavy, and you have to lean on it with your shoulder, but the room behind it is full of actual people who let you in because you earned it, not because you're the flavor of the week. I want to know something from you before I go further. How many of you watching this are seriously thinking about doing a version of this yourself? Drop the city you're eyeing in the comments. Medellín, Cali, somewhere else entirely. I read all of them, and it tells me what to make next. So let me talk about what men get wrong, because I've watched a lot of guys get both of these cities wrong, and I got them wrong myself first, so I've earned the right to say it. The biggest one, the one underneath all the others, is the menu mentality. Guys line these 2 cities up exactly the way that original question frames it. Which one has the better selection? Like they're comparing 2 restaurants and the women are entrees. And I understand how a man ends up thinking that way, especially a man who got chewed up back home and showed up here feeling like he finally has options. But it rots everything it touches. When you walk into a room running that software, the women can feel it, because it's not subtle. And the only women who'll happily transact with a guy in full menu mode are the ones who are also transacting. You attract exactly the dynamic you're bringing. The menu guy thinks he's the shopper. He's usually the thing being shopped. Which brings me to my own expensive lesson, and I'll tell it fast because it serves the point, and then I'm moving on. Her name was Catalina. Medellín, one of my earlier long stays, 7 months. I wanted the easy story so badly that I ignored every instrument on the dashboard that was flashing red. The rent on her apartment that somehow became my problem. The family emergencies that clustered around the end of the month. The way the affection ran hot right up until a transfer cleared. By the time I did the honest accounting, I was out a genuinely stupid amount of money, well into 5 figures, and the worst part wasn't the money, it was realizing I'd handed it over because on some level, I knew, and I didn't want to know. That's what the menu mentality gets you. It makes you a mark, because a man who thinks he's shopping isn't paying attention to who's actually running the table. The second big mistake is city-specific, and I watched a dozen guys make it. They take the Medellín playbook to Cali and they die on the vine. They show up in Granada with the Poblado operating system, apps, bottle service, English, novelty as a substitute for effort, and Cali just doesn't run that software. No dance, no real Spanish, no willingness to be woven into a friend group over weeks. And they end up sitting in a nice apartment in a city that never opened up to them, blaming the city. It's not the city, they brought the wrong tool. Cali asks you to actually integrate, and if you won't, it politely leaves you outside. And the last one applies to both cities, and it's the one that quietly ruins the most guys. Outsourcing your entire life to dating. I see men move to Medellín or Cali and make romance the whole point of their existence there. And it's a trap because it puts unbearable weight on every single interaction and it produces a specific kind of loneliness that I don't think these guys expected. If dating is your only reason to leave the apartment, you're going to be miserable in paradise, and no city's better girls is going to fix a life with nothing else in it. One more thing under this heading, because it matters. You will hear guys talk about Paisa women or Caleña women like each city ships a single standardized model with a fixed set of traits. That's garbage, and it's lazy, and it'll steer you wrong every time you rely on it. The women in both cities are individuals with their own reasons, their own ambitions, their own lives that were fully underway before you got off the plane. The differences I'm describing are about the scenes, the incentives, the infrastructure around foreign men, not about some national character stamped on every woman in a given zip code. The moment you start thinking in nationalities instead of people, you've stopped actually seeing anyone, and you will get played by the exact people who are counting on you not to look closely. So what does it actually take? Let me get tactical, because that's the part that's worth your time. First, and this is non-negotiable for both cities, learn real Spanish. Not restaurant Spanish, not app Spanish. The kind where you can follow a fast, joking, slang-heavy conversation in a group and hold your own. In Medellín, you can technically skip this, and that's precisely why skipping it keeps you trapped in the shallow English-speaking layer where the transactional scene lives. The English-only foreigner in Poblado is fishing in the one pond that's been most thoroughly stocked to catch him. In Cali, you can't skip Spanish at all. Without it, you're locked out, full stop. Either way, Spanish is the single highest leverage thing you can do, and it's the thing the most guys refuse to actually commit to. 6 months of daily effort changes your entire experience of both cities, and filters out a huge amount of the nonsense automatically, because the people running an angle on foreigners are usually working in English on purpose. Second, and this one specifically for Cali, learn to dance. I'm not joking. And it's not optional. Find a salsa school. There are good ones all over the city, plenty around San Fernando and Wanambu. And put in the hours, badly, for weeks. It's the ticket in. It's how you get from being a small event that people are mildly curious about to being a person who's actually part of the social fabric. And there's a beautiful side effect. You cannot fake your way through learning to dance, so it forces the humility that makes you a decent person to be around anyway. If you go see Delirio, the big salsa spectacle, and you feel that pull, follow it. That pull is the door I'm telling you to lean on. Third, make yourself legible as a person, not as a resource. In both cities, the fastest way to reduce your exposure to the extractive layer is to simply stop living like a mark. Don't lead with money. Don't let the expensive dinner in Manila be the whole first date. Don't flash. Build things slowly through friend groups and shared activities rather than through apps whenever you can, because the transactional scene lives on the apps and mostly doesn't exist inside a real circle of friends who'd vouch for someone. I'm not telling you that you can fully outsmart it. You can't. Nobody can. And any guy who says he's got it beat is about to learn otherwise. What you can do is stop advertising yourself as an easy target, and that alone changes who ends up across the table from you. And fourth, the one underneath all of it. Become a man who'd be worth knowing even without the passport and the dollar income. This is the part the whole, which city has the better options conversation, completely misses. The guys who do well in either of these cities long term aren't the ones who cracked some code about Paisa women versus Caleña women. They're the ones who showed up as someone with a life, interests, a body they take care of, work that means something to them, an actual personality, and who treated the women they met as people worth understanding, rather than a scoreboard to run up. That guy does fine in Medellín, does fine in Cali, would do fine anywhere, because the thing that was working was never the city. The guy who shows up empty, hoping a cheaper cost of living and a favorable ratio will fill a hole in him, does badly everywhere eventually, and he usually blames the last city on his way to the next one. The kind of man who succeeds in these environments, and the kind who fails, aren't separated by game or by looks or by which city they picked. They're separated by whether they came to build something or to consume something. The builders find real lives in both places. The consumers get consumed, and Medellín in particular has a whole apparatus ready to do the consuming. So let me pull this together, because I think the honest answer to the question I got asked is that it's the wrong question. Which city has the better women for a foreigner? Neither. Both cities are full of women worth building a real life with, and both cities contain a scene specifically engineered to build a life out of your bank account. And the single biggest variable determining which one you find is not the city. It's you, and the software you're running when you walk in the door. Medellín will hand you the easy version fast, and a lot of that easy version is hollow or is quietly reaching for your wallet. Cali will make you earn it, and what you earn there tends to be the real thing, because you had to become someone to get it. If you want frictionless, and you're not too worried about depth, and you're clear-eyed enough not to get taken, Medellín. If you're willing to learn a language and a dance, and to be bad at both in public for a while, and you want something with actual roots, Cali will reward that more than almost anywhere I've been. But here's the truth I actually want you to leave with. I spent years quietly asking which city was better before I understood that the whole time I was asking that question, I was shopping. And you cannot shop your way into being known by another human being. The day I stopped comparing cities and started actually showing up as a person in whichever one I was standing in was the day any of this got good. The city was never the variable. It was always me. If you got something out of this, hit subscribe. I'm in a different city every few months, and the next videos get into the stuff underneath all this. The money mistakes, the loneliness nobody films, what actually happens when the honeymoon phase ends. See you on the road.